This is the best of the Rocker Morning Show with Meatball and Mark.
Ken, you're on with Mark and Meatball.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going, Ken? How you doing, man?
Great to be with you now.
Hey, appreciate you too. I just want to let you know I love all the work you've done. I really appreciate all the hard work that goes into preserving and educating the country on our history through these specials, man.
Thank you. And I'm so glad you acknowledge the hard work. You know, this film on the U.S. and the Holocaust took 7 years to make.
My God, man, that's crazy.
Yeah. Our Vietnam took 10 and a half.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, and jumping into this new series, which is on Amazon Prime and on PBS Passport, the U.S. and the Holocaust, it's incredibly troubling to me, especially that many people are discovering that a prolific local icon here in Michigan, Henry Ford, had such a xenophobic stance, which they definitely didn't teach us in school. And, according to the documentary and historical accounts, he went out of his way to feed into that fear about the Jewish community. And I'm curious, when you do these documentaries and miniseries, are you learning in the process yourself while gathering this information?
Yes, thank you. That's really important to understand. I'm not telling you what I already know.
Right.
The last time I checked, that's homework. What I'm doing is sharing with you our process of discovery. And I'm a Michigan boy, too, just down the road in Ann Arbor. And I tell you, I was stunned. As we took, school trips to Greenfield Village and Henry Ford Museum, I had no idea. I've toured River Rouge,
right.
All of that sort of stuff. But yes, he is probably, along with Charles Lindbergh, another American hero,
right.
Most responsible for, being a bold-faced name that helped promote just rampant anti-Semitism. And in a way, Henry Ford is worse. I mean, he thought Jews were responsible for the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. They thought that Jews were responsible for the change he detected in his favorite candy bar. But more importantly, he bought a newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, turned it into the second largest circulation newspaper in the country, and reprinted this Russian hoax, this fake document called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was just an out-and-out anti-Semitic tract.
Yeah.
And he published it in a daily newspaper for 61 editions, and then put it into a book, which was translated into German.
God.
So, you just kind of have to shake your head and go, what? How is this possible? And Charles Lindbergh was the chief spokesman of the America First Committee, which was this organization, a big anti-war movement trying to keep the United States out of World War II.
Right.
But his speeches were virulently and obviously anti-Semitic, and you have to sort of steel yourself. It's sort of without fear or favor as when you go into these things. So you just take it and you gulp, and you find out people that you considered unassailable heroes also have feats of clay. It doesn't take away from their heroism. I mean, this guy flies across the Atlantic Ocean solo in 33 and a third hours. This is a big deal. Henry Ford invented the automobile manufacturing. But there's the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say.
Yeah, and for the sake of clarity, too, it's important to know these things. And towards the end of the documentary, you include some of the clips of the insurrection on January 6th. And you've also got a new book, Our America, which comes out, I believe, November 1st. Does that kind of tie into the new series at all?
I've been working on this book for so long. It's the DNA of our work is always a still photograph, and I wanted to do just a beautiful book, a photography book, where you have one picture per page with a minimal caption like Gettysburg, 1863, and then let the pictures seep in, and then when you get to the back, there's a thumbnail of each of those photographs with a description, so you learn even more about what happened. And so it's about America heroically, the beauty of the place, the tragedies that we've been involved in. Every 50 states are represented. All of our films are represented, but without any sort of conscious pointing arrows at it. They're just beautiful photographs. Sometimes they're by great photographers. Sometimes they're just anonymous snapshots. Sometimes they're kids playing. Sometimes there's kids picking through, and I think it's 1904, like a garbage dump just to survive, So it's got the whole story of us in a way. And while the title is Our America, it's obviously very clearly My America. But I've been sharing our story now for almost 50 years, and it's a heroic story and a not so heroic story. And so the book, I guess, is related into the fact that it doesn't blink at the stuff that's going on, but it also celebrates who we are. I think we tend to forget that. We don't ever want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Exactly. And I think that's one thing that your films do really well. You tie in stories, but voice actors and music so well that it really hits you in all of these series. And you mentioned Vietnam series earlier. You had Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross do that Vietnam series. How'd you get connected with them? Did they reach out to you?
We reached out to them and they said yes. We came in and showed them some just interview clips in Los Angeles. This is my co-director Lynn Novick and I. And they said yes, and then they'd work and they'd give us all these extraordinary stems of music that they put together. I wish I'd been the fly on the wall watching them do that. And they've also contributed to this soundtrack for the U.S. and the Holocaust. It was amazing, and to which we added to their soundtrack, like 150 tunes from the period. And we went first to the Beatles and said, look, we can't pay retail. Will you give us a most favored nations rate? And they said, of course, we love your stuff.
That's great.
And what happened is then you could go to every other group and say, hey, the Beatles are giving us 6 tunes at a reduced rate. Can you do this too? And everybody fell in line. And so the soundtrack for the Vietnam film is one of the best history of the 1960s music you could find. Mostly rock and roll, but some folk and a couple of jazz pieces.
Out of all the series you've done, all the films, is there a particular part, any of them that really stands out to you that when you watched the finished product that just kind of gave you chills?
Well, I watch when it's first broadcast. So the U.S. and the Holocaust was broadcast in mid-September, and I watch it as everybody else does, on my TV when it's on. Even though I've seen it 100 times, I just try to be that viewer. And with that film, I ended up sobbing at the end of it, just because we could have done more. We could have gotten more people out. Yeah. It wasn't our finest moment, and yet there are many stories in the documentary about heroic Americans and organizations that saved tens of thousands of lives just on their own initiative. And so it just shows you both the good and the bad. And I think it's really important to have, when you've got, history is always a double-edged sword, to be able to show all of those things.
It opens you up to new experiences, too. After watching the Civil War film, I started taking an interest in seeking out battlefields, and I visited Stones River in Tennessee, and it was stirring, man. It really...
Oh, it's amazing when you go to those places and film. In fact, I went back to Gettysburg after our series aired, and they had seen a 300% increase in people touring the battlefield. Wow. And I was walking across the lawn by the visitor center with the superintendent, and he bends over and he picks up a popsicle wrapper on the ground, and he waves it in front of my face with a big smile and a wink and says, "It's all your fault." Meaning and the same thing happened after national parks. The attendance, which had flattened and had begun to decline in 2009. In 2010, they had 5 million more visitors. Wow. And the Secretary of the Interior, who oversees the national parks and the National Park Service, said, "We think it's all because of your series." And so that's really exciting that you could get a third. That means like a little bit under a third of our audience got off their couch and decided to travel to a national park.
That's fantastic.
That's not supposed to happen in TV, right?
Right.
TV is supposed to make you a potato, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Are there any topics in the future you have a desire to explore?
Yeah. I'm working on several films right now. I'm finishing up a film on the American buffalo, the story of the near extinction and the brought back from extinction. We're doing a big, massive series on the American Revolution.
Wow.
That should be out in time for the 250th anniversary. We're doing a history of LBJ and the Great Society. We're doing our first non-American topic on Leonardo da Vinci. We'll see how that goes. And we're doing a film called Emancipation to Exodus about the story of African Americans from when the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect to the beginning of what's called the Great Migration out of the South that went on for 6 decades in the midst of the horrible Jim Crow and the tyranny of lynch, all of that. So it's lots of different stuff, lots of different wonderful, celebratory, but also dark at the same time material.
Oh, very important. Listen, Amazon and PBS Passport, you need to watch the U.S. and the Holocaust and pick up the new book. Our America comes out November 1st. Ken Burns, serious honor to talk to you today, man. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Take care, buddy.
Live weekday mornings from 6 to 10 and on demand in the Rocker app. It's the best of the Rocker Morning Show on 107.7 RKR.